Is the American dream of income mobility real? A Pew report shows that it may be Hollywood fiction. I'm Allen Barton. Stand by for Front Page. Joining me in studio, Don Watkins, fellow at the Ayn Rand Center for Individual Rights, and Terry Jones, associate editor for Investors Business Daily. MSNBC recently reported on a Pew study, which indicates that just 4% of the people who grew up in the bottom fifth of the income ladder made it to the top fifth as adults. This is interesting, Terry, because a lot of what America is about in terms of not being a class-based society is the idea of income mobility, class mobility, that those in the bottom can rise to the top. This study would indicate that the reality is that most people are not. What do you think?
Well, you know, like most things, it's, you know, the devil's in the details, and the statistics hide a lot of factors. Look, to begin with, 4% is not that low a figure. If you look at a classroom of, say, 40 kids, and if they're all poor, that means 2 out of the 40 are going to end up rich at the end of their careers. That's not a horrible record, to be honest with you. And a lot more of them are going to end up in higher income classes.
Yeah, because they were saying bottom to the top.
Yeah.
What was interesting was, well, you're omitting bottom to the middle third,
and
to the fourth.
Yeah.
It seems to eliminate all concept of mobility except to the very top.
That's right.
And I thought that was a sort of an unfair slice of
Few of us are going to become Bill Gates, but you know, 84, according to the same poll, 84% of all Americans earn more than their parents did. In real terms, and are wealthier than their parents were. And the number is highest for those in the lowest income. 90% plus are earning more than their parents did. So there is mobility, and there's mobility within the ranges as well. It's just that, you know, the relative handful of people who get to the top, well, it's only about 5% of the population anyway that's at the top.
Don, I mean, right now, obviously, a lot of people who are in that lowest quintile, I guess, are people right out of college. They're starting their careers. They're trying to figure it out. Right now, the unemployment rate for those is 25%, something crazy high. How much of this do you think is sort of the mythology of it, the psychology of it, of being able to out-achieve your parents and to live a better life, and that there are people who maybe they've stopped believing in the so-called American dream, the idea that you can move up, and does that play a role?
I think there's no question that some of what's going on here, indeed, possibly a lot, I mean, you'd have to really look into it, that a lot of what's going on here is just that, the erosion of the kind of American entrepreneurial spirit, in large part because of our disgraceful education system and because of the whole idea of the growing entitlement mentality in America. I think fewer people are committed to what it takes to be successful, which is it takes a real effort. I mean, it takes day by day a real effort and real risk-taking, rational effort on the part of the individual to reach that kind of level of success. And that's more or less been beaten out of children.
David Brooks, the New York Times, cites a study which notes that upper-income parents have increased the amount of money they spend on kids' tutoring and extracurricular activities by more than 10 times that of lower-class parents. So, Terry, are we seeing something where, you know, they say the rich get richer and the poor get poorer? The idea that those who have the means are pouring way more resources into their offspring and their abilities and their skills and education, and this is going to increase what they call the income gap, this gap in the haves and the have-nots.
Yeah. Well, there's no question that education is the key here. I mean, if you look at the lower quintile, being college educated increases your chances of going into the highest income bracket by a factor of about 4. So, you know, education really matters. Is it going to get worse? I don't think so. I mean, wealthy people have always spent a lot of money on their children, on educating them, seeing that they had the best schools and all that, and I think that will continue. If you want to make that argument, the argument should be then why aren't poor kids going to better schools? And then you can get into a whole education reform argument, because they're systematically being cheated by the labor unions and the left in this country of having good enough education to rise from poverty.
Don, let's look at the role of government here, because if you look at the statistics and say, okay, we've got this increasing gap where wealthy few have certain things, certain privileges, certain ability to help their kids, and the poor do not. Does the government have a role in trying to fix that, in trying to do something about solving that problem, or do we let it sit, in which case that gap can widen and widen and widen. You could have societal breakdown of a certain sort. You could even have discord and unrest.
Well, I think that would be trying to solve a problem created fundamentally by government intervention with more government intervention. Because I think at the end of the day, Terry's exactly right. The fundamental cause, to whatever extent there is this breach, is the complete and utter failure of government schooling. That government schooling has left the particularly poor kids without an education and therefore without an ability to rise. And what we're really seeing is that wealthier people have more resources to try to get around that disaster. And so what should the government do? The government should get out of the way. And the first thing it can do that I think would put us on the way, actually give these kids a chance by allowing their parents to use tax-deductible money to send them to real schools.
Vouchers and other mechanisms by which people can choose what school they go to. A McKinsey report issued that in June notes that by 2020 there will be 40 million too few college graduates globally to satisfy the demand. Surplus of 95 million low-skilled workers. Terry, again, this is globally. This is not just this country, of course. What do we do about that? Obviously, as technology moves forward, you need more and more high-skilled, highly educated people to deal with manufacture, administration, tech, all that stuff. What do you think of this? Because again, what I worry about is if you leave it alone, you could literally have civil unrest in many places when you have too much of that gap.
The problem is we've had so much mythologizing around education that it's impossible now to sort of separate the strands of truth from fiction. But here it is in a nutshell. We've told people for the longest time that all you have to do is go to college and get a college degree and everything will turn out well for you. Well, we're finding out now that that's not true. A lot of people have inferior college degrees where they learned little or nothing and they basically were warehoused for 4 years and they got a degree at the end of the process. Future generations are going to have to understand that when they get an education, it should be linked to ultimately to doing something when you get out. You should have to learn something, a skill, a base of knowledge, something. I'm not saying that English majors don't have any role in the world because I was an English major, but you should have to know going in that when you come out, you have to have concrete knowledge because yes, we will have a gap in the future. If technology continues apace, we're going to have workers who are capable of working in a technological world.
Don, in terms of that idea of what are you studying at college, I mean, I think the studies are that those who get a college degree in the sciences and in engineering are a much higher percentage of being able to do well and make a decent amount of money versus those who are in the humanities and the arts. Should the government have any role in trying to encourage or facilitate study of science and engineering?
Again, I don't think so. I think, again, this is a problem really created by government. There's no reason, not one reason in the world, why most people should be going to school into their 20s. In the Enlightenment, people would go to school until 15, 16. They were vastly better educated, and then most of them would learn a trade, and only very specialized skills, say being a lawyer, would you go to a college. I think there's no reason on earth why that is not the system. If you're going to go into business, if you're going to go into a whole bunch of different sectors, what you should be doing by the time you are 16 is you should have mastered a basic skill set, and then you can focus on learning a trade, learning a skill, going into an industry. And the problem is that by the time people are 18 today, they're not educated enough to be able to be of any value in a business.
Terry, and could the government be called culpable because there is sort of an education bubble happening? Because obviously the government has gotten into the business of financing education, so of course there's a gigantic asset bubble of a college education, which may be worth about as much as you thought your house was worth in 2007.
Yeah, and now they've taken over entirely the college financing. So I mean, government's been pouring money into education, for a long time, but especially in the post-war era because it was seen as such an unalloyed good that there, nobody was against it. But what we found out is that where government money goes, higher costs inevitably follow. waste, inefficiency follows. And you look at the higher education bubble, and that's exactly what describes academia today. It's wasteful, it's inefficient, it's overly expensive, and there are new paradigms on the horizon like the khanacademy.org and all these things on the web that are going to blow it out of the water.
All right, guys, for Terry and Don, I'm Allen Barton, and you've been watching Front Page.